Welcome to the Windrush Caribbean Film Festival podcast. The journey continues. I'm Nadine Drummond, award-winning journalist. On this episode, we discuss Notting Hill Carnival and talk about stories of resistance and joy with Ansel Wong and Ray Mahabir. Tune in and follow our socials for more.
Today, we are being joined by two stalwarts in the carnival business. We have Ansel Wong and Ray Mahabir, and I'm going to ask these two wonderful gentlemen to introduce themselves. Ansel, please.
Good. Hello, everyone. My name is Ansel Wong, a Trinidadian by birth, and been living in this country for more years than I have lived in the Trinidad and Tobago. And I have been involved in a number of things, arts and cultural things, particularly the Notting Hill Carnival, and then generally Carnival globally and throughout the UK. So I have been involved with a carnival band for the last 45 years, and this is my final year of involvement in the carnival.
And you, Ray?
My name is Ray Mahabir. I'm the artistic director of Sunshine International Arts. Again, I'm also a Notting Hill Carnival designer, Trinidadian Notting Hill Carnival designer. I've lived in the UK for 29 years and delivered work. Now deliver work nationally and globally in terms of culture, carnival, and most importantly, my work is based around the history of carnival.
Why carnival? Why have you both dedicated your lives to carnival? Ansel?
I think Carnival itself is a global festival. It's a pre-Lenten festival that most countries who've been colonized by the Catholic Church has resulted in aspects of that festival. And what we have done as Trinidadians brought that concept, brought that culture to the UK and have refashioned it, reimagined it, and reinterpreted it into what we know today as a carnival, specifically the Notting Hill Carnival that I'm associated with, but there are over 10 similar carnivals throughout the UK. So it was quite easy for me to get involved as a Trini, coming to this country and trying to grasp and hold something that I'm familiar with, opportunities to live and experience. And I started all of that by being a seller of roti in the carnival.
How about you, Ray? Why carnival?
Well, I always say, for me, carnival is in my DNA, my blood, and and so I'll tell you that carnival is the main festival that we actually have on the island. So for me, I was born on the island and grew up on the island, and carnival was a major part of my life. And it was a dream of mine when I was the age of 11 to be a carnival artist. Coming to the UK at the age of 32, when I came then, it was because I think there was smaller Caribbean carnival events, and we started to evolve here in the UK, and they wanted a little more of the color, the excitement, and as a lot of people will know, Trinidad, as Trinidadians, we have perfected the art of carnival. We have spent a lot of time creating costume for us. And the going back a couple of years, when I learned the art of carnival in Trinidad, we created the costume element, the street element, and that show. So a lot of people wanted that excitement in the UK. So when I came here in 1998, no, it's 1989 or something. Sorry, I confused the years now. It's going so far back. There wasn't such a thing as a carnival artist, because a lot of people ask me how you became a carnival artist. And I'd say, well, I just grew up, now we have courses, now we have other things. But for me, carnival is Trinidadian. Carnival costuming and the excitement of carnival costuming is Trinidadian. So when I came here, I actually brought something with me. I might be wrong to say UK needed people like me, or needed the culture to boost the culture. So I came here, brought the culture, and I went through a whole evolution of life, of seeing the change of 28 years ago to now, how things have evolved. So for me, Carnival is in my DNA. Carnival is my life, and Carnival is what I do best.
I certainly think that I agree that it is in part of the DNA. And one of the interesting concepts of migration of people from Trinidad and Tobago, when I came here in 1965, was the expectation that because you were from Trinidad, you can play steel band, you could sing calypso, you could play cricket, and you play mass. And in some instances, I can do neither of those. And therefore, in order to be a true Trini, you certainly had to acquire expertise and knowledge of all those things. So I play wind ball cricket at home, so therefore you adjust to red ball cricket. I couldn't sing a full calypso. I could sing the chorus. So then you have to learn how to sing a full calypso with all the lyrics. Yeah, I couldn't beat pan because the pan I beat was a duduk. So therefore, I was limited in my musical capabilities. So I turned to then Carnival because I used to play mass, what we call in Trinidad Red Indian mass, and that was my forte. So I know how to bend wire, how to thread beads, how to do swans down, and all that sort of things. So when I became a youth worker in Harrow Road, it was natural for us. And that natural approach was influenced by some fortuitous evidence when we had a number of Trinis in that area planned. We call it the Trinidadian Mafia. And as we came together, it was quite natural because we were on the carnival route to consider what do we do as Trinis to join this carnival. And they turned to me as the youth leader with my limited experience. And because, as you know, to create structures, you can either have circles or you can have petals, nothing else, unless you are very inventive, like somebody like Ray. So my construction, my structures was all based on circles because that was the easiest structure to make. And then you decorate that and you get the young people to do that. So that's how my creative juices started to be engaged and involved. And then you begin to watch what was happening in Trinidad, people like Peter Minchell, in the UK with people like Ray Mahabir, and then you adapt, you copy, and you change. So that was the creative process for me.
So I was born here. I was introduced to Carnival by my best friend who's from Trinidad. And so I started going to fetes and Carnival for when I was 14, but I was playing mass, which was different from the sound systems and everything on the road. And since then, I've played mass, I think, in every country where there are Caribbean people. I've been traversed to Brazil. There's also a carnival that's going to happen in the next couple of years in Nigeria. So I make it a point to play mass everywhere in the world. And it is part of a cultural expression. It's part of a celebration because the highest high I've ever had is when I'm on the road. However, I also know that it's part of a resistance, which is you're free. It's one of the only times in the year that I'm free in every aspect, how I present myself, how I look. There's no judgment. And so those elements of Carnival, how did they manifest themselves in Carnival in the UK? The freedom and the resistance elements.
Great. Go ahead, Ray.
I think we're still resisting it. I said, in terms of right now it's worse because I think we now, as carnivalists, we fight for the road, and I do a lot of national projects now, so I work a lot of places, and artistically that is my strength in these projects. But then you have to be involved in the actual production of this of the overall carnival, and a lot of time we're still fighting councils funding councils, cultures, because sometimes people feel you come to invade their space kind of thing. So Carnival for us is an ongoing battle, and we're still part of it is we're still fighting for the streets and the rights to take our art form and take our culture to the streets. I mean, a lot of what I work on now is what we call global. I work on a circle of global carnival, because obviously now we are very diverse, and a lot of the places I go to may not have Caribbean people, but they want the experience of what they see carnival to be. So for me, it's also bringing these people into the culture, and bringing these people and allowing them to take over the streets. So the fight and the resilience from I think it's 200 and something years ago, from the abolition of the slave trade in Trinidad, where people actually took to the streets and celebrated. That is one of the main points I use in my work now. That is free people. Carnival for me is about celebration and free people taking to the streets. So one, there's still a battle. I mean, in terms of the arts and culture in the UK, there is a big culture now, a big fight for that culture to still be seen, because one of the main things I personally feel is Carnival is not respected. Carnival for me is something you all do on the streets, but it's an important art form. And the fight is still there for people to understand that Carnival is not something we just put on some feathers and something and we go and party on the street. Carnival has a deep rooted history into Britain, slavery, and freedom of people. So for me, I personally think the fight isn't over. The fight is still going on.
And I think you're right to define it as a resistance or a not judgmental process, because its beginning for me when my time was very much relating to elements of that resistance and to trying to find a space, to define a space for us as Caribbean people on the social, political, and artistic landscape of this country. In the same way in which when we came, we find ways of adapting, whether it's people from the Windrush ship or others, and we're looking at our cultural elements and see how well we can adapt it. There is Ray having a cup of tea that is symbolic and different to us. In the same way, in the early days, Trinidadians came. They had to find ways of recreating their culture. So we have something called kuchila and chutney, but we don't have the green mangoes here. So we had to use green apples. So there was an element of adjustments and so on. We loved our pigtail and pickled pork. They threw all that away in the market. And there were one or two seminal individuals who used to go to that market in Ladbroke Grove, collect all of that, and then put it into the brine and then sell it to the community. There was Lucita, who would sell her roti in the Oval Cricket Ground. So whenever the West Indies played cricket, we know that to go into the Oval, go up to that top element, you can get a roti from Lucita, because there were no roti shops anywhere. So what was that process? That we found ways and means of adapting and integrating our culture into the British landscape. And Carnival was just that as well. We find a way of doing that opportunity and to stamp it as ours and to become part and parcel of our celebration. And when it was threatened, when it was cursed and how the police liked to put you into little boxes, we resisted. The young people resisted. So for me, Carnival was just one of several ways of us defining our space, defining our identity, and giving an outlet for our creatives like Ray Mahabir to begin to express themselves.
And I'd like to thank you for that. And I'm sure there are hundreds and thousands of people who descend from the Caribbean in this country who feel that way. because often once you leave your home, you're in the outside world. It's almost like you're in their world and you don't quite belong yet. Even when you think you'll belong, you're often reminded that no, actually you don't. And Carnival is one of those things where you can go and see elements of yourself or reflections of maybe how your grandmother spoke or the things your grandfather told you about. And it's a really special moment for us as people descended from the Caribbean. But I think it has a different, I could be wrong, but I think it might have a different for the revelers that come to experience the party but don't necessarily understand how it moves you and it affirms you in a cultural way. So thank you for fighting for the road, and thank you for stamping our broader cultural identity in this place.
And
But
thanks to the
So
creatives like Ray Mahabir who have made it possible.
and one, just to add to this overall topic, Nadine, you made a very important point that I'm not sure you did, but you said you travel around and take part in Carnival, and that's the one day of that freedom and that celebration. But Carnival has always been about transformation. So even the historical elements and the historical costumes that I like to work in and I work in, it's about transformation. So Carnival is that one day you forget all your troubles and you become something else and you transform into that being or into that costume. The costume is what then gives you that whole energy and that transformation. So in terms of resilience and everything, is that's the one day, I mean, these are sayings from China, that's the one day you forget all your troubles.
Yeah,
And you,
that's the theater of the mass.
yeah,
Whether you're Julius Caesar or whether you was a slave or whether you are the king,
yeah.
it's the theater of the mass and on the road.
so this year is the precursor to the 60th year of Notting Hill Carnival, which is the largest street festival in Europe. What moments to each of you stand out as pivotal in shaping the identity of Notting Hill Carnival?
I think one of the major things for me was the extent to which we have continued to struggle to get the powers that be to acknowledge and to recognize carnivals as an important feature of British society and therefore to support it through sponsorship, through grant giving and others. And this is a continuing struggle. Carnival happens. It's not planned by anybody else. It's us. It happens. And it happens on a shoestring. But then it generates over 300, nearly 400 million pounds to the economy of London, of which we get not one penny.
Yeah, I agree with Ansel. I mean, so for me, artistically, that was my main. The first time I actually portrayed as a band leader at Notting Hill was I first was a designer, then a band leader. That was the proudest moment in my life because I actually got to showcase costumes. Right now, I just got goosebumps on my skin, but the fight for that, and even now, the fight for the road, and the road is important to us, and we again is the resilience and all the things that we have to go through, and as Ansel said, we get nothing. We have to pay for that art. So it's like putting on a show and not having any funding or any support, but the band leaders and the carnivalists actually have to pay for everything while someone else is making the money. So it's it has always been a challenge and a difficult moment. I mean, like Ansel and myself, we are, as we say, cut from the older cloth, and we do this I'm sure more for passion than worrying about the money. I mean, delivering culture and the art of carnival is more important than, well, it is more important than the struggles that we go through to actually take part in Notting Hill. But again, as I always said, my highlight of my year work is portraying that piece of whatever my production was on judging point, or at that particular stage point where you actually get to show the proudness of the culture and your work?
I think my proudest, or my not proudest, but my memorable experience from my 45 years of being involved in Carnival was during the bank holiday weekend is a weekend when within the Caribbean community, there always have to be excursions to the seaside and to places people go. Whether it's a church, whether it's a credit union or whatever, there's always people organizing trips to the seaside. And those coaches taking people would be parked outside our mass camp, bank holiday weekend. And I remember watching that community going together, mostly the older generation, on these excursions. And then parallel to that is us as a younger generation getting ready for Carnival. And in those days, it was using T-shirts. And remember, we didn't have the sophistication. So we had stencils, we had shaving brushes and Dulux paint. And we used that to print our T-shirts. So we would have a string from on Harrow Road right down to the end of it, a string, literally a string, and all the T-shirts we print by hand, each one by hand, would be hung up there to dry. And it's an interesting image of coaches of people, Black people, getting ready to go to Bognor Regis or wherever, and then at the same time, young people, second, third generation, with these trying to hang T-shirts like on a clothesline to dry in time for Carnival.
I hope you have pictures of these things.
No, we don't.
Oh no. Okay. Well, it's still all histories, and it's still good to talk. But now I'm worried. So, Ansel, you said this was your final year of advocacy and engagement. So, how have the younger generations been engaged and prepared for leadership in performance and planning for Carnival's future?
I think that is one of my biggest failings, in that we did not have a proper succession strategy to pass on to the leadership in terms of the Carnival. And the risks we have is that we will lose ownership of the event because our young people and second, third generation ones are not coming up to take control and to take ownership, to be involved in the management and the delivery of the Carnival. And it's important because things are changing. The young generation have different concepts of how they want to play mass. They have different concepts of how they want to enjoy themselves. Listen to you, and your experiences is very much differences from our generation. I am in my 80th year this year, so I think it's time to give up and to pass on the things to others. And it is a struggle because what Ray said about us doing it pro bono, and just doing it for love, that no longer exists among our young people. They are professionals and they want to be paid for their professional inputs. So therefore, it is significant and important that in the delivery of the Carnival in the 60th anniversary, we engage our young professionals, we engage our young creatives, our aspiring practitioners, and make sure that they get the proper remuneration for what they do.
And how about you, Ray?
I had a conversation this week kind of relating to this topic. And this is a general thought I had, is that a lot of people fashion, not necessarily Notting Hill, but, they fashion Trinidad Carnival, Jamaica Carnival, and all of this. And the islands use Carnival now as a selling tool for tourism. So I kind of feel as if people look at the islands, and I say the islands because it's, people look at the Caribbean islands for Carnival kind of thing. And they then see this package that's being sold as a tourist package where the art and culture of Carnival is being thinned out, and the party element is the bigger element of the sales. So similar to what Ansel, I spent a lot of the original work that I did at Notting Hill was youth arts, and it's bringing young people into Carnival. And they all would then not want to wear a costume, but they want to wear something skimpy. Let's just leave it at that. But I kind of, my work was not based on that. But over the years, they got to enjoy it. They got to enjoy being dressed up. And going back to the fact that what Ansel was also trying to say, back in our days, my whole excitement of Carnival is what was my costume, what I'm going to be. Not necessarily. I don't think it was ever I'm going to party. And that's the change now. Back in my days, it was like, what is my costume going to be? What color it is? What kind, that was the excitement of my vision of Carnival. Whereas now, some people's vision of Carnival is, what is the party? So there is a change over the years in terms of what we see or what we project or what the media actually portrays what Carnival is. So the portrayal of that media element of what Carnival is not necessarily, I suppose, what Ansel and myself may consider Carnival.
It's making a portrayal on the road. So when you get onto the road, it's occupying that space, all of that space. You don't want anybody around you because you are the king, you are the queen, you are the main person. So you want to dance that costume and move and explore to everybody, showing all everything. Just like what the concept of voguing. You vogue on the road with your costume, whoever you are, because remember, you're behind a mask. So nobody knows who you are. So it's the character you're portraying. Whereas for many other people, it's wanting to jump up, to whine, and to get on bad. But you can get on bad with a wing. You could get on bad with a headdress. You can get on bad with a mask. And I think that's for me is the important thing. What do you do on the stage? And the road is the stage.
It's that transformation. So it's that same thing going back to what it is. As I say, I remember choosing my costume. Back then, you choose a costume and you started like you're excited because you're kind of going to be changing into this character. If it's Peter Mitchell played Rat Race. I was a rat. And I was so excited to be a rat. I mean, it was the most elaborate rat you could think about. But, that is the whole point of Carnival. You actually, I was a rat. And I loved every moment of that rat.
I was the only rat in Notting Hill because I brought my costume back to Notting Hill and I played rat on Notting Hill.
That's the beauty and the richness of what I'll say we here, but what we know as Carnival. Not necessarily, I'm going to have a great time on the road. No, I transformed into that rat and I had the most amazing time. So having a great time and having an amazing time is two elements of the two visions of Carnival and how Carnival has evolved over the years, or what people think. And as I say, sometimes you feel it's the portrayal, the media's portrayal of what Carnival is. And again, we go back to the fact that islands use it as a tourist. I don't know what's the word to hear. It's a tourist pull. So everybody know, I'm going to spend 2 weeks in Trinidad, and then they make how many billions? In the pandemic, there was a whole issue because we didn't have Carnival for 2 years. And it was a loss of earnings from people who making costumes to the party people, to the vendors, to everything. But then again, as Ansel was saying, the same thing as Notting Hill. Somebody's making the money, but not us.
But also, I think the Carnival has a perception in terms of the optics and the personal experiences that people have, because it changes. The whole event, they start early with Juve, and at the end, it changes in mood and circumstance and content throughout the day. And that if you want to stand back at Carnival as an observer, not a participant, you can see how that mood changes. And the best way to illustrate that mood is the police. Come early morning with a police serial next to your band, very helpful, engaging, supportive. By midday, you have police optics of they're dancing with women in different forms of nudity. And by dark, they've changed their uniform from white shirts to riot gear. And that, when you look at that transformation across the day, gives you an interesting perspective of how the carnival is seen. That many participants don't normally see that, but when you step back, you see how the Notting Hill Carnival and the carnival here in the United Kingdom is reflected very much in that simple dynamic.
And then you also have the other clinical carnivals, the ones that I said that there's a lot of carnivals around, so it can be quite clinical. You arrive, you get dressed, you take part, you leave, and sometimes in an hour's time, you don't even know there was a carnival there. So it's the clinical element of carnival. And, I mean, overall, it's what you get out. Carnival is something that we give you. Carnival is something that is there for you, but it's how you take it. And again, I don't knock anybody in the naked costumes. I don't knock everybody has the right, but it's just not my vision of what carnival is. And for me, I do a lot of work and a lot of educational work around carnival in the UK, and to an extent, the Ansel's generation that came, a lot of people were not involved in the carnival element and culture element, so it's thinned out. So their grandchildren now don't really have a clue about the real history of carnival or Caribbean people. It, again, is what social media tells them. So everybody now is fixed on social media too. So they go with what's on social media, or, well, the younger generation is very, very fixed on social media. So the true, real identity of the culture and carnival, it has been washed out or thinned out. Again, it's how it's interpreted now, which is not really the true.
And things will develop, Ray. Things will change as a result of our children and our grandchildren, who will help to mold and define that. Already, I've seen things that have happened that we are trying to introduce as different from Trinidad. For example, we know that all our road marches, the road march is a tune you play on the day that everybody to dance, is always exclusively from Trinidad or from the Eastern Caribbean. Whether it's calypso, soca, bouillon, zouk, or whatever. There has no real British-inspired creative songs that can form part of our musical road march. And we try to change that by commissioning a woman to compose a tune for Pan that will become the road march. It failed because nobody wanted to play that music because they didn't know it. But it is a way of moving forward and bringing that opportunity to people to understand. We tried to introduce Tassa, the music drums, in Carnival, and we introduced a young classical violinist who would then fuse a classical tune with Kez's Savannah Grass to create our road march. So things are happening that are helping to mold and change the artistic determination and outcomings of the carnival. And it will continue to happen. Our young people will continue to drive that agenda, and all power to them.
So can I just ask now, so just for our audience that may not know, Tassa is a unique form of drumming from the Indian Caribbean community in Trinidad. And so what happened when you introduced Tassa?
It's a dola drums, yes, and we have that form where we used it as a rhythmic accompaniment, and we've tried to change the rhythmic and music that we accompany our carnival band in very significant ways. So we introduced Tassa, and it was a question of the drumming and people dancing to the drumming. One year we introduced musical street trumpeters from Rajasthan, and they would have those long trumpets they would play. It was difficult for people to dance to because it's not rhythmic in like a soca. One year we introduced a modern group called East West, which is an Asian group who was playing Western music. So we were always pushing the boundaries, pushing the orthodoxy, and trying to change things. Not always successfully, I admit, because it's difficult for anybody to know and want to enjoy themselves and party to David Rudder, and then to have this classical element in their head.
So let me ask another question to you, Ray. So how do you incorporate storytelling or historical references in your designs?
I would say, cannot design a piece without a narrative. So I always base my visual work around words. So all my bands over the years always had a narrative of a reason behind it. And I will then I did something called Oil Slick. And Oil Slick was a fully black band, but it actually dealt with the war when we went into Iraq to mass destruction and all that. So I would then have elements in the costume that reflects it. And even the cultural reference of most of my character costumes are based on historical costumes from Caribbean, redesigned, refashioned. But I always have, all my costumes have some sort of element from historical costume, but narrative, words, and meaning. You know, a lot of people would come to my band launch or my mass camp to say, and they want to look at what's the reading because they know there's a story behind it. It's not just I did love and death. That's the name of the band, but then they want to read why. Why is it called that? What is the reason behind that? Or, you know, so throughout all my designs, none of my designs over the years have never not have a narrative or creative words with it. And also, as I say, the costume element all has a bit of historical reference to it. So it's kind of teaching, but in a different form. And, you know, I remember when I did Oil Slick and I did a project at the, I did a costume for the British Library, and the person I worked with then, she was an older person, so I'm sure she wasn't going. And then she was talking to her daughter, and she says, "Oh, you know, I work with this guy, and he made these costumes for nothing." And her comment, because she didn't really, her daughter didn't know about the costume element that much. And you know what was her comment to her? She said the most outstanding costume in the whole carnival for her was the oil rigs. And for me, so we created I took oil rigs to Notting Hill, actual oil rigs, 14-foot high oil rigs. And she was it's costume, but designed around oil rigs. And she said the most outstanding thing for her, for the whole, and she said, and you know, I didn't even tell her what was your band. So it's making that impact, making that, my costumes have always been different. My costumes have always been modern, different, but with that element of history. So for me, I always remember that story because I made an impact on this young person. And the story of Oil Slick came to her just from a vision. She told her mom the only impressive thing she saw the whole day was my oil rigs. So that little element of, so, you know, sometimes they say that one person, if you change one person's life, you made a difference. So that is out of what, 2 million people? And this one person could say the most impressive thing for her was that, and she didn't even know, and her mom was talking to her about it.
Okay, yeah, I understand that, and that is absolutely brilliant. I mean, this year, as I said, it's our last presentation after 45 years, and what we decided to do was to reinvent a concept, a theatrical, artistic concept which we call Kavenge Couture. Kavenge Couture, Kouture. And it's a play on words, because what we are saying is that we will be scavenging, which is Kavenge, with our mass bands and so on, to donate used, unused waste materials and costumes, which we will then recycle in a new way in a couture. And that the idea behind it is to make sustainability and to create a green carnival, to the extent to which we changing the dynamic. Because, you know, in carnival, you have to have something new all the time. If you bring anything old or what you did before, you would look down upon. Yes? So it has to be new. But what we are trying to do is to recreate that concept of something new, but using something old. Kavenge Couture. So on Carnival 2025, you're going to be seeing how we have taken costumes donated by band leaders and individual designers and recreated it with young people using materials and bringing it on the road as new bespoke couture.
So this is so creative, but I always wonder, because when I've played Mass in Trinidad, even though there are millions of people that fly from the UK, from Europe, from the Americas, that come home and they bring their friends with them, there's so much space. So I'm wondering, in the UK, how do you design for impact in a space where movement, music, crowd energy, then half the road is taken up by police? How do you do all of these things to maximize the costumes and the wearer's performance?
I think I remember I remember having photos when I first came here, and we had the grandness of the streets. And you know, there's a particular, I can't remember all the names, but there's some particular streets, you have all these white buildings going on, and the costumes would then, we'd flood the streets. But over the years, this has happened to us. So this is where the costumes are now. So I am very much into large costumes. So I would have 17 to 18 large costumes. And I remember one year looking at it and thinking, oh my God, we had to be single filed because we were so squashed. There was no more room. So flooding the streets with carnival costumes is a thing of the past, you know. And for me, sometimes I'm passionate about the art form, but I love the grandness of costumes. I love when I put a show on. I put a show on in 2024. I spent £45,000 in feathers alone to put a massive production on the streets, and that was one of the best things that I have ever done. But again, I didn't have the money for that. But the company, you know, we have to beg, borrow, and steal, as we say, to kind of make sure these things are all there.
I think what is happening, to take up your point, is that the carnival route is becoming defined for a procession, not a carnival parade. And therefore, the procession implies continuous movement in a more or less single file along a linear route. And what happens is that for us as creatives who have large costumes and who want to occupy space, we have to narrow our performance area. So our performance area starts from Woodfield Road and it ends at Ladbroke Grove. And thereafter, people derobe, take their costume off, put it onto the lorry, and then we know we got to face crowd density, crowd excursions, and difficulty right through leading up to the Harrow Road. So the performance space is de facto broken up into two segments. And the segment of the theatre, of the stage, and then the third is the bacchanal.
But you did introduce the whole overall conversation topic and the piece to say it's the largest street festival. So we are now more street festival than a carnival in Europe. Because I think in the beginning you did say Notting Hill is has been one of the largest street festivals in Europe. And I always now say, yes, that is what it is. Because as I say, the crowds have gone this to us. So now this is the outer ends are the punters, the audience, the party goers, and the actual masqueraders are in the middle. I had an administrator who came from Notting Hill, who lived in Notting Hill. And the first year she was working with me, she was so excited to take part in Carnival. And she tried to get her friends and her roommates to take part with us. They didn't even know there was such a thing as costume element because people go for the sound system on the stage. They don't know there's another side to Carnival. People go to that sound system on that stage and the jerk chicken kind of thing. That's the party element. So Carnival is very much a street festival now.
And to be pedantic, if you judge largest by number of people as audience, then Notting Hill is the largest with 1.2, 1.3 million per day. Brazil in the Samba's drone is less number of participants, but it is a bigger carnival in terms of participants. Trinidad, the 1.2 million here is more than the population of Trinidad and Tobago. So numerically, Notting Hill is the largest carnival in the world.
So Trini say Carnival is the greatest show on earth, right? And that is speaking specifically about Trinidad Carnival. So a lot of ingenuity, a lot of innovation comes from Trinidad when it comes to Carnival. And other islands, they have their own version, like you would say, Spice Mass and Grenada for say. So how does Trinidad seek inspiration from other carnivals, say like Brazilian Carnival? I've been to the Carnival in Bahia, which was mind-blowing. But where does Trinidad's creativity come from? And then how does that still translate here in the UK?
I think this is my kind of view, but I said that how we spent probably 100 years perfecting the art of Carnival. So Carnival first starts now, but not just now, July in Trinidad. Carnival is February next year. So we literally spent 6 to 8 months of the year, half of your year is evolved around this greatest show on earth, putting on this greatest show on earth, putting on this whole festival. So I don't think a lot of times, I think I as a designer, I'd go somewhere or I'd see something on a newspaper or something and I'll pull it out. And I wouldn't say I copy it, but I perfect it the way I want it to look, kind of thing. So I suppose the young design, because we have a lot of young designers in Trinidad now that create the work. And it's about, I don't think a lot of them has the experience of costume design and costume element. I think a lot of people, one thing I would say here is a lot of people play mass, as we say, but they don't have that in-depth 45 years I have of actually taking part in carnival costume, making costumes, doing things. I haven't been in the mass camp. I've done everything. I've experienced it all. So I evolve. And that is how Trinidad Carnival works. As I say, there wasn't a course, or there wasn't a university or something you would go to learn the art of carnival. You went to the mass camp and you sat there and you glued, you wire bend. But it's your creative mind that allows you to embellish. As I say, I would see something and say, oh, that will make a nice costume. But I'd do it this way and I'd perfect it, I'd perfect it to my desire then and my way of being. And I mean, over the years in Trinidad, I was a fashion designer. So that was my career. And I use textile a lot in my work, but because of the new generation, I included feathers and I evolved also to ensure that the art of carnival is perfected. But not to say that I would say, I look at India why I look at Brazil costumes, why I look at um, New Orleans or something like that. It's a general kind of vision you have and a general sort of um, seeing something, creating something, and embellishing, and I'm going, oh, I'll do that, but I'll do it this way. So we twist things as
Yeah, I think
young designers, and
there's a
we
myriad.
we fabricate, we twist things. But with the experience, you say, oh, I know how I can make this better. And
You're
I don't,
absolutely right. You're
yeah,
absolutely right. There's
I
a
don't,
myriad of influences on the individual artists as well as on the carnival itself that help to develop themes and trends and so on. In the early stages, our carnival in Trinidad was influenced by Hollywood. So all the Hollywood theatrical costumes with the bronze breastplates and the flags and the banners were incorporated into the carnival, so that you find people like Ken Morris and others who would develop the etching and the development of copper work as part of the mass, because it was linked to the large films that came to Trinidad, the Ten Commandments, Ben Hur. When you look at their theatrical costumes, that is what influenced, and the westerns. So we developed the Red Indian or the Wild Indian mask as a result of that, and therefore that pattern continued. Then it was the individual creatives who would reinterpret elements from their personal perspectives to be able to be competitive, because you're competing against another band. So you want your costumes to be attractive, to be affordable, and to be embraced by everybody. So each element developed until we've had specific genres that are permeating our carnival. What Peter Minshall referred to as the Las Vegas showgirl, the diorama of the Las Vegas showgirl. You know, that image, which has helped to define what is then called pretty mass, manufactured creativity. And then in London, we have all of that. And now in the last 4 or 5 years, Ray might be aware of this, but there are pressures on the artists from outside forces to try and help to redefine, or for them to tell us what we ought to do. So the Indigenous Peoples Organization in the UK is objecting to Red Indian Mass because they said it's a disrespect to the first peoples of the Americas. PETA is objecting to the use of organic feathers in our pretty mass. So with those external influences on our designers, things will change. So what will happen as a result of that will be interesting. And one aspect certainly of that is the extent to which our creatives are now devising artificial feathers and making artificial feathers and creating that mirror the organic feathers and look just as good, if not better. So creative like Elwin Johnson in Trinidad is doing that. And then that's how our artistry develop, our creativity develop, and make the carnival modern and up to date.
plus, I mean, right now, one of the things about the global part of carnival and costume making is things like feathers are in less. We're having less feathers now, so people have evolved. So in terms of the evolution, feathers have become much more expansive. There's less feathers to have, so people have actually evolved, still wanting that pretty mass as we call it, but looking at ways to make pretty mass without the feathers. So the evolution of carnival, that's how the designers work. That, oh my gosh, I can't get enough feathers to make this, but they look at another way and they would create the same sort of impact. It's creating the impact with a different format and evolving as we go along, looking at sustainability. I mean, one of the things I always say about Trinidad Carnival women costumes, it could be whatever they could call it naked mask, they could call it whatever, but I look at it as a woman perfecting her body to be in that. And for me, that alone is an art form. Because if you know Trinidad women from August, they stop eating carbs, they stop having sugar, they go into the gym twice a day. So for me, that art form, they put themselves through to get their bodies ready for carnival. I mean, to be honest, when you go to Trinidad now, it's so hot, you really need to do a bit of walking, running, and exercising because the temperature also have changed a lot and you can struggle a lot to do. But you see these women in the most glamorous portrayal, I'll say portrayal, but it's a perfection of their body and their art form. So the evolution of, I suppose, the designers now, coming back to your original question, the designers now are fashioning, not looking externally, but looking at internally and saying, okay, the women do all of this to create, they put themselves through this art form of their body to get into this costume. So the new sort of designs are designed around the women's body. Sad to say, there's not much men in carnival kind of thing, but the men are very happy with just a shorts, two armbands, and something around the neck, and they just party. They don't care. But I suppose the design element of costumes, that evolution there is from the feathers to evolving to creating that showpiece and also fashioning it. You design and fashion around your body because I always had three elements to my designs in my band in Notting Hill. The younger girls, the mature women, and the the mature generation. Let me say it this way. So I had three elements of designs, and I designed the costumes around that. I'd say, "Well, Nadine would like this," and people would come to me in my band and say, "What you putting me in this year?" And I'd say, "So," because they know I kind of design costume around the person's, I wouldn't say body, but the person's mentality. Some people like to be covered. Some people like to be a little not so covered, and some people just don't like to be covered. Let's be PC here and put it that way. So people would come to my band and wouldn't really choose a costume. They'll come and say to me, "So what you putting me in this year?" And I'd say, "Go and see so." And they'd see that design and say, "Yes, that is me," kind of thing. But it's designing around a personality. And design, for me, it's, even I'd have someone ask me this weekend, I did Eastbourne Carnival this weekend, and somebody asked me, how do people wear big costumes? And I say, well, after the time you might see somebody and say, oh, Nadine will be very good in a large costume instead of thing. And I'd say, okay, next year I'm going to give you something. And you slowly build them into it. And as soon as you put that, as Ansel say, you're a queen. You ain't going back. It ain't no going back. That is me. That is my costume for the rest of life. And it's designing around a personality, or I don't want to use the word a body, but I don't mean a physical body, but it's a mental body, like.
And you're right, Ray. If you become a queen, it's very difficult for another person to aspire to be queen. You have to give up that throne. You have to give up that crown. And not many people are willing to give up that crown or throne.
And it's how you portray the costume, and it's something you see. So new people would come in and say, well, next year I'm going to give you a bigger costume. Just the way, and it's not necessarily seeing them in a costume, It's your personality in the beginning, how you evolve in the mask camp, how you get on in the mask camp, how you kind of want to be part of it. And so the design element, the portrayal element, I don't think we look at a culture or anything and say, yeah, that's how I'm going to design. I mean, I say that, but when I went to India in 2001 and started to work in India, I loved the embellishment. And that has been part of my life. But because of my Indian roots, it has always been. And I love what I call the untrained eye of art in India. They're not, oh, pink and blue will go together, or green and this. No, you just give them whatever and they put it together, and it's this wow moment for you. So India color, in India culture, India layering in terms of a people and a decorative mode is something, is always because people would say, oh, that's a Ray Mahabir costume, because I have an in-depth way
A
of
style,
a style. I recently made a costume 2 years ago for someone, and the woman was very upset. And she's like, and she started to pull costumes from my history and say, but look at this costume. I said, but that's my style. I don't buy appliques. I make appliques. So my work is appliqued and layered. I like layered. My staff, the people come and say, oh God, we can't just stick. I said, no, you have to find 5 braids and sticking layered work. And the woman was so upset. I said, but that is my style. I can't change, that is, it's not that I copied or anything, but I have a particular style, and it's that layer of the art and the culture, which is part of my life. So you do pick certain things up as a designer where you would then, as I say, when I went to India, I fell in love with this madness of culture, but I always use the phrase that it's a layered effect. So when you look at a lot of my work, it's detailed. Where somebody would go to China or import appliques, I don't. I rather make it from scratch. So all my pieces are layered. And sometimes it's a mad combination. People come and say, oh my God, do you know what you're doing? And at the end, it comes out into this thing, because it's always in my head. The vision, the design, the culture is in your head as a designer. But it's how you bring it out. But the average person wouldn't see what, what's in this head kind of thing. So fashioning, costuming, designing, I don't think we copy, but we embellish. We see something and I say, that's a nice shape. I'll turn it into a costume. That's a nice hat. I remember being on the tube and seeing a lace over somebody's head, and I thought, oh, that'll make a nice headdress. And it was different. And I had lace going down on the people's face kind of thing. But, so it's most of my designs have always had a little twist of something different. Not the normal headdress or not the normal carnival. My work has always not been normal, but it has always had the twist of something. And it's something I see and like the younger generation, the same way as I'm saying that how Trinidadian would fashion around the women's body. So for me, every year I'd look at what the young people are wearing on the tube and kind of get a vibe of the young people on the tube for my young section. And then I'll go to them and say, oh my God, I see this so. And they're like, yeah, we want something like that. So you fashion something around. So I'm not copying, but I'm looking at all the young people or the youth. They probably thought I was a pervert. But that's how I kind of picked that. This year they're wearing thick socks. So, different things. You kind of sit there and you kind of pick.
I think that's is so true. I mean, at the moment, we have created this concept of what we call parallel performers. Because you find in Carnival, there's a lot of people who would follow your band, particularly the women, and they would dress up to the hilt in a way in which they are very much, as I see it, they're wearing a mask. They would have their Timu or their Shane dresses. They would have their wigs. They would have their nails, their eyebrows, whatever it is, and caps and so on. And when you look at them, I say to them, that's a mask. You're playing mask. So, and they would jump outside the security rope and play mask with you. So what we have done is to say, you are a parallel performer. You're not in the band, but yes, you are in the band. We are now including you as part of that band. And you might come, bring your Timu dresses, bring your Shane dresses, and we will embellish it. We will bling it. We will give you all sorts of things. So when you come on the road, you can be happy and easy and join the band.
You see, I didn't even know that had a name, because when I was much younger, when I used to go with my friends, we couldn't ask our parents for money so we could play mass, especially because I'm Jamaican, I'm not Trinidadian. Yeah. That wasn't part of my parents' cultural repertoire. So I used to go to my friend's house. Her mom used to have all of these gems and Ben Wire and all of these things. And we used to make our own costumes and dance side or play mass side of the band. And so I had no idea that was a thing, but it is a thing.
Yeah, we call it, and we accept it because a lot of the girls wouldn't want to play mass, and they don't realize they spend all this money, or they don't spend much money, but they dress up. Yeah, and sometimes they dress up as a group. 5 or 6 of them is as a little group, and sometimes they coordinate with their dresses and things. And we say to them, "Sorry, you're a section. You know that you're a section. Without realizing you're a section. Join us. Come to the mass camp. We will give you materials to bling the things and make it even better. We might not be able to give you a wig, or might not be able to arrange for makeup or anything like that, but we have makeup artists there, and they would come and do their things." So for us, as talking about Ray, is how the evolution happens, and we bring those that it's just me. I call them parallel performers as a way of defining, because they're running parallel to us as a band. And in 2025, this year, we are targeting them to come and actively part of the band, so they can join us. Whether they can stay within the security rope or they can stay outside, we will ensure that they can dance and be part of the band without feeling as a foreigner.
Oh, that's amazing. I wish that existed like 20 years ago. But it's amazing.
You can still join us. You can still join us. Don't worry.
Thank you.
You know, this weekend.
Sorry,
Sorry,
Ray.
just to as Ansel's talking about that, and a parallel here is like this weekend when we did Eastbourne Carnival. There's no barriers, there's no rope, there's nothing.
Yeah.
But the audience respect us. They come to see us, and we perform to them. We go to them and we perform to them. You know, and it's such a difference. Whereas in Notting Hill, we are rope team, and you have to be. And it's something I know. It's something a lot of people don't like, but people don't understand. Then what happens? That mass of those million people will just come into you. So when you do, I like doing some of these projects because you get to put, again, for me, I get to show the show work. You know, that is what it's about. Show work, show culture. And the beauty of it is you can go to the audience and perform to them, and they enjoy it. They don't rush to come into the band. They look at you as an audience. That is what it should be. The audience is there to look at what we are presenting. So there's a big difference in terms of Notting Hill and and other events you do. And sometimes it is enjoyable to kind of just portray your master, and people actually appreciate. You feel appreciated. Whereas Notting Hill, they might be scared because they want to jump in, and everybody wants to jump in, and then there is a whole craziness on the road.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. I think I'm not sure with this whether this is a factual or not, but certainly in Notting Hill, it seems to be one of the only carnivals where you have to be roped in. Every other carnival we go to Kingston Carnival every year. That's not the case. I take my band to China for the last 12 years, and we enjoy broad streets and engaging with people. So, but Notting Hill, for some reason, the security rope, is an important feature of our presentation.
And it's safety. I mean, it becomes safety because I remember we have young ladies. We have a range of people that you have to be as band leaders. It's about safety for your participants. So then nobody knows. I always say to a lot of people, everybody's like, "Oh, why we don't do that?" It's like you don't actually know the stress of the day. You're worrying about crash, you're worrying about police, you're worrying about, you spend more time worrying about music breaking down, you name it, rather than the fact that, you're actually there to take part. As I say, I love doing these. I actually get dressed up at these events when I do these things and be part of the whole carnival because I love performing to the audience.
And walking up is not an excuse to be inappropriate sexually or any other way. And that's why we have SIA trained security people to make sure, because our young people or young teenage boys see that as an excuse. And we've
Yeah.
seen so many evidence of how they would surround a young lady, a woman, and then have engaged in inappropriate behavior on the pretense of walking up, because they don't understand the concept of walking up, as all they see differently. And I think how we make that education and knowledge and awareness to our people is very important. We saw that particularly among young, for many years, the young lads and of Somalia and Ethiopia of major problems with that situation in West London, because we were based on Harrow Road, but very close to that community. And working with that community, it was very evident that the young men did not understand it at all and used it inappropriately.
That's another sort of freedom for them, I suppose, because they're not allowed, you know. So when you look at cultures too, when you travel to Carnival, and you have to deal with culture too, and you have to be aware of people's culture.
Yes.
That, you know, what we perceive as Carnival and what we think of going on the road, but then we go into different environments that have different cultures, and one you have to respect, but you have to be at the back of your head. You have to realize this is not necessarily what we call Trinidad or Notting Hill Carnival. You have to respect somebody's culture, even, you know, like here in the UK. Obviously, you'll go to somewhere that doesn't have the wine and jam and dance kind of thing. So that you have to be conscious that that's not what we're here for. We are here to showcase the richness of our culture. So it's being aware of
not only
people's
showcase,
culture.
we need to capture it, preserve it, archive it, and demonstrate. As we have been told, is how do we preserve the history of Carnival as our generation leaves it, and that history needs to be archived, history needs to be captured, and then made available to everybody.
I have another question. So we've been talking about influence, we've been talking about respect, we've been talking about culture and all of the pressures that Carnival organizers have to deal with in order to share this cultural phenomenon with the United Kingdom. So in what ways have political movements or social movements like Windrush Justice or Black Lives Matter or anti-gentrification campaigns influenced Carnival planning or messaging?
Go on, Ansel.
As a band leader, also as a community worker, it was very important we acknowledge and recognize what is happening around us as a community. And also, even as part and parcel of the Carnival, we had lives outside of the Carnival footprint, outside of the Carnival sector, in terms of community activism, politics, and so on. So inevitably, you will be influenced by that. And with our focus on young people as a youth center, it was important for us to understand all of those elements and the impact of some of those things that were happening around us. So every aspect, for example, in a practical way as well, to the extent that we have to prepare a risk assessment plan in case there is some kind of disruption or Carnival. We try to embrace that with Extinction Rebellion, who were at that point a few years ago, if you remember, were taking active part. They approached us to be part and parcel of our band, but there was clearly a risk in trying to do that, because if they decide to act independently of you of a band, you disrupt the whole of the Carnival, even though we had a feeling, an awareness of their case that they want to make, which we supported. So those were some of the key issues that influenced what we did on the road or didn't do on the road. So we were aware of issues around the politics of Carnival, the extent to which whatever we do on the road is very much policed by other people, and we are kettled as a community in terms of a major celebration. And wanting to push those barriers, push those boundaries all the time is something that we all do as organizers and band leaders.
I, I suppose in terms of political statements, involved in my design and my work, I think what I said earlier on, because normally I would have a 2 months mass camp running, and I use that 2 months mass camp. If there's a particular topic that's happening whichever year, and use that 2 months actually to involve it into my design or the narrative, but also use those 2 months to actually highlight the topics that the topic of the time, then whichever topic of the time. So I always had something happening over the, as I say, people come to read, people come to, and I used that 2 months as a selling tool to highlight the topic of the actual year or the season or whatever is happening. So I've always tried to involve not the highlight the political, the topics, whatever that is of that present time. Similar to, well, that takes you back to Calypso, because Calypso each year is written from what's actually going on there. So I suppose I fashion it around that. As I say, a lot of my work is going back into the history of Carnival. So for me, that 2 months is when I used the point to highlight if I need to get a topic out there, or if there's a topic that we need to be aware of as a community, as a Carnival group. That is my opportunity. That has always been my opportunity to highlight it then.
So things happening around the community is recognized. I mean, the classic example is Grenfell, obviously, the extent to which we acknowledge and recognize with moments of silence during the procession. So all of those things, as a band leader and as an organizer of a carnival, you have to take into account the safety of young people, the importance of safeguarding, the issues around people's vulnerabilities, the issues about the extent to which we have to embrace people with disabilities and vulnerabilities. And all of those things are important, not only in the design, because environmental impact and well-being really happens at the point of design. So the designer is the most important part of that process of dealing with those external issues. Because what you design, how you design, and the outcome determines presentation, performance, and outcomes. Yeah. So those events, whether it's happening in our community, whether like in 2024, the so-called carnival murders that happened, and now the impact of a review on crowd dynamics will impact on 2025. So we need to approach 2025 in a very professional, structured way, and to ensure that the powers that be don't use those opportunities to shape the carnival in a way in which is not to our advantage and not to the creativity and to the culture from which it came.
So how do we do that then? How do we preserve that legacy as best we can from the powers that be, and for the expressions to be rooted in resistance, freedom, and joy and love and creativity and inclusion? How do we do that?
I think the onus rests squarely with the organizers of the carnival, the people who are organizing the carnival, plus the 5 arts arenas who represent the different creative arts of carnival. It is those organizers who occupy positions of authority and power to ensure that their negotiation with the strategic partners, the mayor's office, the police, the GLA, and others, the local authority, Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea, City of Westminster, that they set the parameters, the boundaries, because internally there is always at the bottom of every aspect of carnival planning, the vision of moving this event to Hyde Park. Underpinning all of that is a consistent positioning of moving the event to a safer environment. And I think we have to acknowledge that the carnival is a street festival, the carnival has certain elements of a spontaneity in it that has not to be shaped by external forces and strategic partners. So our organizers who are in charge of the carnival, that has to be their role and the event, consulting with us, talking to us as a community, and making sure the essences of this carnival, in terms of its creativity, its spontaneity, its rebellion, and its history and heritage, are reflected in every decision they make.
I agree 100%. But I will also say is what I said earlier on, and it's one of my missions is a high respect for the art and culture, because as I say, a lot of people don't understand. A lot of people don't understand Caribbean Carnival. A lot of people don't understand nothing, the reason behind, as Ansel said, the reason behind why it is where it is. So it's more respect and more knowledge of who we are, what we are, and why we do it. And for me, that is kind of the starting point also, because people just think, as we're saying now, it's a street festival. But it didn't start as a street festival. It started as a carnival to celebrate the Caribbean people that came here, the Windrush, all of this. So it's an important element. Carnival itself is an important element, and it's something for me. We need to start using more education about the history and the roots of Carnival and the meaning behind it. And that is kind of one of the main mission that Sunshine and myself work with and deal with, is trying to get a little more respect in terms of the art form and who we are and what we do. And that would assist in everything that Ansel has said. Because people now think, oh, it's just a street party. But there is a carnival. It is a carnival. It is a big carnival, a big celebration. Celebration of it came on the Windrush. It's the Caribbean people that came here. That's why it's in Notting Hill. So there's a lot of history that, as I said, is thinned out and washed away, kind of thing. But we need to, part of the whole idea of what we do is to keep it going, keep fighting that fight, keep. You just kind of, as you say, what you're gonna do, you have to keep fighting. Sometimes this is flogging a dead mule, but you have to keep going. You have to, that probably is not a good pun to use. I'll probably be tooled off with that. But we have to keep going. And for me, these sort of conversations are really helpful and very enriching, because you can voice your opinion about how you feel about things and the way things should be.
I think we're going over time.
Sorry.
It was such a pleasure. Thank you both. You're both legends. You're, I guess, in Jamaican patois, what you would call tapanaris. Yeah, big man in editing. And so I'd like to thank both of you for joining us. I'd like to thank
Saga
both of you
boys, Saga boys.
Saga boys.
Yes.
It's wonderful, and our hope here is that your interview will last through the ages, and it will be used in 100 years, 200 years time by descendants of Caribbean people who want to understand what the challenges were, what the joys were, what the pains were, how love was reflected in this period. And so what you've done here today, how you've given us your time today, is great, and we would like to thank you from the deepest recesses of our souls, especially for those of us that love Carnival.
Thanks for having me, Anne.
And as Carnival, let's hope the platform for the film festival will continue as well to be an important feature of the celebration of our culture and our creativity.
Here, here.
Indeed.